I was cruising into retirement 3 years ago. I just wanted to be left alone, and they won't leave you alone. So you either surrender or you fight back, and that kind of feels like the position I've been pushed to.
I don't care what happens to the system. I care about the people within it, but I think we've all got our path to kind of choose now.
These periods of friction can actually be a springboard really to kind of transcend it and say, you know, I'm going to grow into a stronger person. I'm going to kind of mature.
Maybe this is it. Maybe we're in the hard times now, and this is where the stronger men are created. And I suppose the ones that will come out the other side that pass the lessons on are the stronger people. The best thing is like what you're going to pass on to the next generation. That's they can take forward with them.
Welcome to the Staying Free podcast. So we've come to the end of 2023, and I wanted to end the year with another Freedom Roundtable episode. So if you've been following the podcast for a while, then you'll know that at the end of last year, I did something which I called the Freedom Roundtable, where I got together a bunch of people who had been guests on the show before, and we just went over everything that happened that year and giving our thoughts and perspectives on everything that's going on in the world, just something very casual and a bit of a reflection on how things have moved on. So I wanted to do another episode this year. So I got together three guys who are very popular in the UK freedom movement. That's Ryan Rowley, Parallel Mike, and Yuri Bezmenov's Ghost. So if you're one of the many new listeners that I've got from the United States and other parts of the world, you might not have heard of these guys, but I have done episodes with all of them before, which you can go ahead and check out. And in this episode, we just give our perspective on everything that's happened over the year and everything coming up. Tried to give it a bit of a positive spin, although there has been a lot of craziness happening in 2023. But also for me, it's just about bringing the podcast back to its roots a bit. When I first started this podcast in 2021, it was really just talking to people within the freedom community and getting their ideas and perspectives. So at the end of every year, I just try to touch base with that. So I hope that you guys enjoy the episode. If you do, make sure you give it a like and a share on social media. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, give it a 5-star rating on whichever podcast app you're using. If you're new here, do give the pod a subscribe for future episodes. You can support me in a number of ways, including buy me a coffee and Bitcoin tips. You can see the links in the description for those. And you can also support the show on the Fountain app, which is available on iOS and Android. As always, I will quickly read out the boosts I got on the last episode. Piers, once again, 500 sats, says thank you, peace and love. Thank you, Piers. And I got an anonymous boost from user 64891291, who said, interesting discussion. Some people, such as Augustine, saw evil not as a thing, but as goodness lacking, or broken, or missing. Keep up the good work. Thank you to that anonymous booster. As always, boost, tips, and any other ways that you guys can support me is hugely appreciated. And I also just want to say thank you to all the listeners who have followed me along this journey. Especially this year, I've had a huge increase in the number of listeners, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to these conversations, and hope that you're getting good value from it, and I hope to keep bringing you more in 2024. So have a great Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll see you in the next one. So guys, welcome to the Freedom Roundtable Round 2. I have a couple of returning guests here in Mike and Yuri Bezmenov's Ghost. That's Parallel Mike from Parallel Systems Broadcast, Yuri Bezmenov's Ghost, as you'll know from Twitter and from doing his events, which I'm sure we'll get into as well. And we have a new member for this Freedom Roundtable, which is Ryan Rowley. So welcome, guys. I'll introduce you in turn. So Mike, first of all, welcome back.
Cheers for having me back, Johnny. It's exciting to do another year. It's amazing. Just a year ago we was doing this, and that year's flown by. So thanks for having me back, and nice to see you, Ryan and Yuri. I don't really get to interact with new people too much, so it's awesome to have a bit of a long stint with two new people where we can chat about some of the craziness.
Absolutely, yeah. And Yuri, welcome back again for round 2.
Yeah, hi, Johnny. It's been a while, hasn't it? When did we speak last? Must be probably a year ago.
It will have been approximately a year, yeah.
Yeah, it's time flies when the civilization's collapsing around you, doesn't it?
Yeah, doesn't it just? And Ryan, welcome to the Freedom Roundtable Round 2. How are you going?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I listened last year and it was great, and I think it's been a while since we got up. I checked the other day, it was March last year since we've last connected. So yeah, been a while.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's cool to have you guys on here. Obviously, it's a different group from last time, but I feel like everyone's bringing something a bit different to the table. Mike, you've got a lot in the way of kind of education and educational content and doing things around self-sufficiency. Yuri, you're doing a lot in terms of community building and running your events, which I definitely want to see what events are going on these days, whether you're still doing stuff this year or doing another winter warmer.
You just missed it, unfortunately.
Did I? I think I was out
3
of the
weeks
country.
ago.
Yeah. I didn't make it in time. And Ryan, you're obviously doing, a lot of tweeting, keeping everyone sane on Twitter, and tweeting about personal development and stuff like that. So I feel like everyone's kind of got a little bit of a different thing to bring to the table. So first of all, let's just get into the first thing. I mean, I've got a bunch of topics here, but obviously feel free to, we can just kind of totally go rogue if we want at any point. But just to kind of get things kicked off, I'll just go around and just get everyone's general thoughts on 2023, because, kind of we've all really connected off the back of everything that happened in 2020 with COVID. That kind of kicked off this whole freedom movement, if we want to call it that, which we just kind of had a debate before starting this about whether that's a good term, but we'll go with it for now. And like here we are in 2023. Like I feel like the community, generally speaking, is still kind of going pretty strong. I mean, the topics have changed, but there's still a lot of great connections that have been made that are still carrying through to today. So, Mike, what's your general thoughts about how 2023 has progressed in terms of goings on in the world generally, and also just your kind of reflections on the freedom community as well?
Yeah, it's been a long year for me, Johnny. Lots of work, and I try and keep up with what's going on, like as much as I can. But then a lot of my stuff is focused on very specific parts of it. So I like to focus, as you know, on the financial side of things. And there was some really big stuff in regards to that. One of them was this, The Great Taking, which was a book released by David Rogers Webb, which was discussing how the elite banking cartels have essentially ensured that when the next financial crisis comes, all of our stocks, bonds, all of the housing with mortgages on it, any factories, farmland, equipment, anything with a loan on it will all get handed off to the secured creditors, who are the biggest banking cartels, to backstop them and their derivatives. So that was a huge thing for me this year, because I was right on the forefront of that one, working on it, actually doing the primary research after having met the guy who wrote the book. So that kept me busy, and that kind of drew a lot of attention, and I was kind of embroiled in that for a while. So that was good for me, Johnny, because it allowed me to focus on what I enjoy doing, which is research, rather than the pantomime, or as we spoke last night on my podcast, the clown show. And it is just one giant clown show right now, and I try and avoid all of that stuff. Similar to Ryan, actually. Ryan focuses on his area, which is trying to put out positivity. That's why I really like Ryan's content, because we can all sit here and talk about the politics all day long. It's getting us nowhere. It's not actually contributing anything, in my opinion. It just keeps us distracted. So that was my year. Very busy, very enjoyable, very tough. I'm tired. I'm ready for a little break, and enjoyed it, but ready for 2024. I think that's going to be a more significant year, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. Yuri, thoughts on 2023?
Yeah, sort of. I think I agree with Mike. It feels like it's been a long year, but at least a lot's happened. It feels like, there's this agenda at the moment, isn't there, of accelerationism. And it does feel like that every week and every month and every year seems to be absolutely packed with stuff. And I've made a conscious effort, actually, to try and, drop a few kind of commitments this year. And it's not been as easy as I'd hoped, actually. So I'm still getting involved in things I'd really rather not get involved in. But yeah, personally, it's been a great year, actually. I mean, I started the year with my winter booster, which was a great success. And people ask me about these events. I mean, they're a bit more to it than just, going out and having a few beers and a good time. It really is about kind of creating that community. And, the great upside, I was talking to a friend the other night. I've met some truly extraordinary people in the last 2-3 years. And my only regret is that I didn't meet them 20 years ago. And I've tried to one of the things I've tried to do this year is, I do the events and they're good fun, but I've tried to sort of think about what do we do that's a bit more kind of constructive in terms of, creating networks and sort of communities that can, react to some of the things that are going on. And I've put myself in a position work-wise where I've got a lot more time going into next year, and I'm going to have some capacity to really focus on some of the sort of groundwork that's about creating resilience and sort of communities locally, because I I don't know, I'd be interested to get Mike's take on it, but I think next year could be the year when the shit properly hits the fan.
Okay, right. I'm definitely going to make a note of that then to talk about how you guys think the shit will hit the fan. We'll get into that a little bit later. But first of all, Ryan, your thoughts on 2023?
Yeah, it's been a bit of an interesting one. It feels like every week there's a new story out and everyone's going off in different directions, talking about lots of different things going on at once. But personally, I've had a few things going on in personal life, but it's been quite... I'm trying to flip it, as I always do, on the positive spin, like work on the personal development. And then I've also been trying a few little things on the side business-wise, which hopefully will come good next year, and then I can start sharing that, because I want to try and show people other ways that they can not just improve themselves like personally and mentally, but also like financially as well. And I think that's in, I'm hoping if Yuri does some more of the events, because I've been that busy, I've not been able to make the other ones, but I think it'd be good. We need that community aspect now, I think, as well, for people. Need to start building that community for the next couple of years.
Yeah, totally. I didn't make it to the other one. I think I've been out of the country literally for every single one of these events. But I mean, I don't know whether to say I hope you keep having them, Yuri, because I'm kind of hoping at some point you don't need to have them. But maybe that's just something that we accept, and we just kind of embrace it. Just say, okay, like the winter boost is just going to be a thing now, and just keep it going. It's just a place for like-minded people.
It would be nice to think that we can do it, in a slightly more social kind of context, rather than as part of our emergency planning network.
Yeah, rather than trying to figure out how to just not get fucked by the state. So I guess like topic number one that I've got to go into, and I don't want people to kind of be yawning for me going into this one, because I know that it's kind of a topic that's pretty tired at this point. But I did read today when I was looking through what are the biggest stories of the year, just to kind of like talk about, get everyone's takes on them. I saw that the Times said one of the biggest stories of this year was the COVID-19 pandemic could be officially over, which I just had to laugh at, because, for most of us, it never, for us here, it never even began. For most of mainstream society, it was maybe over in kind of like early 2022 or late 2021. But Time has decided that this is the year. It could potentially be officially over. So, ridiculous headline. There is still kind of this hangover from it. I'll just give my take first on this. I mean, as much as I think that it's over in terms of like a big story, the thing that's not over for me is that we have not, as a society, reconciled everything that's happened. Society went down an extremely dark path, and we've just kind of papered over it and gone, oh yeah, that didn't really happen. There's this kind of like, there's this awkwardness there that, I mean, awkwardness is probably not doing it really justice, but there's a scary moment that's happened in history with COVID, where, we had governments doing pretty crazy things, people saying crazy things and we're still in the hangover of that. I still don't feel like we've dealt with it. I think, they've tried to do the whole, let's have a COVID amnesty. But, as far as I'm concerned, like we shouldn't let this die, okay, I'm not saying we should talk about it all the time and be fixated on it, but, people should, in my view, go to jail over this. I mean, people are dying. I'm glad that I can at least say on this podcast, now that it's not on YouTube, that, we're having all of these vaccine deaths and injuries that have happened off the back of this. And, that's all being quiet. Like the vaccine injured are not getting the justice that they deserve. So, as far as I'm concerned, there is still work to be done here, and we still need to kind of like pile on the pressure. And, it's a good thing that people are still talking about these things. Mike, what's your take on where we're up to with all the COVID stuff now?
Yeah, well, I think that headline, they're telling the truth in a sense, in that it's over for them, as in they're actually admitting, oh shit, it's over. We can't pull this one off any longer. So I think when they say it's over, it's almost got a secret meaning for them, which is like it's over for us, not as in it's over the pandemic, because of course there was no pandemic. Yeah. And in terms of, like, is it over for us in terms of what you were saying? Like, absolutely not. I mean, the deaths are piling up. There's a huge monumental pile of bodies. How do you ever reconcile yourself with that? How do you ever forget what's being done and will continue to be done because of it? It's impossible. It's one of the greatest horrors in human history, and it continues to unfold. So it's not over for me, certainly not. And I'll never forget what was done. I'll never forget the people who said what they said. And I don't believe those people have atoned at all. And I don't trust those people, Johnny. Anyone that was saying people need to be locked up, put in camps, have themselves shut out at home, or have special fines attached to them, whatever, all of that big long list of psychosis that was coming out of these people. Yeah, I'll never forget them, and I don't trust them. And I guess for me, it's just pushed me further and further towards my own destiny in life, which is to be around people who get it, be around people who want to leave the system. I mean, I've got no interest in the system anymore. That was it for me. I was already on my way out of it, but, I don't care what happens to the system. I care about the people within it. But I think we've all got our path to kind of choose now. And that to me was the big fork in the road in life in general. You either were going to take the route that we've all gone, which is this route of radical personal responsibility and this understanding that we have to then start creating our own parallel systems, or you said fair enough and you buried your head in the sand. Now, okay, there's a few people along the way that have decided to recognize what's being done, but I've got to say it's very few. In my life, there's nobody that, I can't name a single person in my family that called me up and has said, Mike, we was wrong. Mike, we should have done X, Y, and Z. Mike, yeah, we realized. Not a single one. So, and I've accepted that. And that's the great thing about me in terms of, yes, COVID's over for me in that respect, that I have accepted what's being done. I've accepted how everyone behaved. I've accepted all of it. And I'm so far down my own personal path now that it is done for me. And I'm moving on to the next one, which is getting my family ready, my community ready for what comes next. And I think we've got a lot yet to come. So that's what I'm focusing on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's the way is, take all these things that are happening and, rather than just kind of like getting afraid and burying your head in the sand about it, like take decisive action, I think that's what all of us here have done is we've all just said, okay, this thing has happened. Like, I'm not just going to kind of like shy away from it. You just need to take action in your life, learn from it, and then just say, okay, who are the people I want to spend my time with? What's my community going to be, etc. I'll go over to you on this one, Yuri, as you've been someone building communities off the back of this. Where do you think we are with all the COVID stuff? How do you feel about it now?
It was fascinating, actually. I was only yesterday, I saw, I can't think who posted it. Somebody posted a video montage from 2020, would have been the back end of 2020, I think, maybe early 2021, of all the usual talking heads in the media. And everyone was about how, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, we need to treat these people like second-class citizens. And you look at it back now and you think, that can't be real. They can't actually have said those things. And they did. We all know they did. And as Mike says, like, I will never forgive these people. Like, never. I mean, if they came to me on bended knee with a groveling apology, then you might go, yeah, okay, fine, I'll accept that. But there's absolutely no sign of that happening. And it's just like the greatest airbrushing exercise in history, where there are literally millions of people who just want to pretend the last 3 years didn't happen. And and it's interesting now because I find, myself, I'm not belligerent about it, but I'm taking opportunities now to kind of dig when people say things and, about COVID. And I mean, the classic today, I was having a conversation with somebody about, as an unvaccinated person, well, let me rephrase that, as a non-COVID vaccinated person, I've had pretty much all the other ones that have been going. I'm part of probably one of the biggest medical control groups that ever existed. And yet nobody is showing any interest at all in studying us as a control group. Yeah. And I think we all know why. It's because the evidence will basically demonstrate that, and I'll stand to be proven wrong on this, but every single person I know that has not had the vaccine, is in pretty good health. And I know, dozens of people, a lot of my colleagues at work and some of my sort of extended family that have seemed to be perpetually ill with all sorts of medical complications and things. And the only difference between us, in every other respect, and we all know what that difference is. So yeah, I mean, I think, and for me specifically, I think it was a real wake up actually, because I'm a real optimist and I've always had, very high regard for my fellow citizens. And I can remember back to the Brexit vote. I remember after the referendum, you know, and it was close. I grant that. And well, actually, I don't think it was as close as it was ever reported. Actually, I've seen some interesting, you know, information that said actually the vote was more comprehensive, but that's a whole nother issue. But I think what we know now about elections, I think there's a highly good chance that was true. But at the time, I came out of that very optimistic, thinking, yeah, this is great. You know, people want responsibility. You know, they want accountability. You know, they want to take control of their own destiny. And then COVID hit, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, what happened to people in that period? Because, you know, people that I thought, you know, highly of, you know, almost overnight turned into like raging, you know, sort of fascists, basically, that even were quite happy for me to be confined to my house and, you know, refused to see me. And in one or two cases, you know, got quite aggressive. So COVID may be over as a, you know, reportable media stroke state narrative, but, you know, I'll never forget.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, people got pretty crazy during that whole time. And, you know, it was like really difficult, but like you said, I think I've watched the same video as you did, the one that's kind of like a montage of people saying stuff. And at the time, the thing is, even at the time, I remember how crazy that was, but other people would have watched those exact same things and had no response. I think there's like two types of people. Some people watched that and was like, okay, well, we're living basically through kind of 1930s Germany again. And other people watched it and were just like, oh, pesky anti-vaxxers, you know, go get at them, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, we're obviously all in the former camp. But yeah, when you watch it back now, you almost forget how crazy it was. It's like, I haven't become particularly desensitized to it at all, even though that all happened. I watched those same videos today, and I'm almost more shocked by them now than I was then. Yeah.
The one thing I would say is I've got a couple of good friends now that have sort of, you know, both vaccinated and you know, kind of came around halfway through probably. And, you know, just they would, and I think a huge chunk of the population actually have been abused. You know, their good nature and their trust has been abused. And I think they've come to that, you know, sort of realization now. And they're almost, you know, some of the most radical people now, because, you know, it's like we all kind of saw it early, so we don't feel abused. We just feel like, you know, we were, you know, attacked, I suppose. But, you know, people that were, you know, did things in good faith and now have realised that the whole thing was like unnecessary, frankly, are absolutely raging.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think similar is like they can't drag the COVID narrative any longer because there's too much coming. Like, I think now we're at that tip of the iceberg where you're really seeing the overspill from everything they've done. Like all the money printing that happened, the vaccine injuries and deaths that are coming out now, that's starting to hit the media more or just being captured on certain events. And I think they push that down the line too much. So they want to end any talk about it now. Then you can just switch onto other topics and keep that masking over it. But yeah, like I said, I think a lot of people feel they have been cheated. And similar to you, I've got like a few people that are like that, where we managed to keep things quite diplomatic between us, even though we disagreed on the whole COVID thing, and now they're coming around to the idea. So I think it's woken a few people up, and like I said, people are starting to realise, like, building these communities and moving away from trusting the government. So I don't think it's all a bad thing, and I don't think many of us will forget what they did. And like I said, I think it's just one of the things, like you learn from it and then you realise you need to take on more responsibility yourself and do something about it. Otherwise, you're just going to get caught in the same trap again.
Yeah.
And I think it was Ivor Cummings that shared that video the other day. I was just having a quick check because I was pretty sure I shared it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was the one. Yeah. So you mentioned something there, actually, Yuri, when you said about the vaccines, and you said, well, you know, I haven't taken the COVID vaccine, but the other ones. I'm just interested to know, I guess, from all of you, actually, like whether you're, well, two things. First of all, whether you're skeptical on vaccines generally now? Has it changed your opinion more generally? Because it definitely has me. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily an anti-vaxxer or something now, but I never used to really have any skepticism towards it. Whereas now, definitely this skepticism I've had from the COVID one has spilled out into other ones. So I'm interested to know your guys' views on this. I guess I'll start with you, Yuri.
Simple answer is yes.
Right.
It's like all these things, you start questioning when people start applying aggressive coercion. That's a major red flag. You go, well, hang on a minute. I'm a rational, reasonably intelligent person. I look after my health, and I don't take unnecessary risks. So, why do you need to threaten me to take something? It's and then, I started looking into things like, I remember years ago, well, I've got 2 kids and they're grown up now, but, we had to get our kids vaccinated, with the MMR vaccine, pretty soon after the whole controversy about the MMR vaccine came out. And, we did a lot of research at the time and we took the decision at the end of the day to get the kids vaccinated because actually, it didn't seem to be, the risks looked very low and the benefits looked reasonably good. So on the simple, sort of risk benefit basis, we went ahead with it and touch wood, it seems to have, not created any problems. So, but then I started looking into things like the polio vaccine, and when you look at the data for that, the polio was on a massive downward trend before the vaccine was even available. And like I'd never come across, terrain theory, until 2020. And then I thought, well, okay, that's interesting. What's that all about? And kind of intuitively think, well, there's a lot of sense in that, surely. And, I'm nearly 60 now and, I don't take any medication. I eat well. I, exercise, not excessively, but reasonably well. And, but it's extraordinary the number of people like contemporaries of mine that are on, multiple medications and things. And, some of that could be bad luck, but some of that is, I think, just, looking for an easy option and sort of the pharmaceutical industry loves that because, you're ready-made customers because people who aren't prepared to put the work in, look after their own health and take responsibility are ripe to be sold products, and that kind of, it's made me just look at the whole pharmaceutical industry and think it's an utterly corrupt industry, frankly.
Yeah, I've looked into the terrain theory thing more. I did an episode with Alex Zeck a little while ago, and I'd heard him actually at the Greater Reset talking about the terrain theory stuff. And when I was at that event, I was like, yeah, there's something here. I'm not sure that I'm kind of like all the way in that camp, but I was like, there's definitely something here. And then so yeah, I definitely recommend people check out that episode that I did with Alex Zeck. If they want to know more about that topic, because he really articulates it there. Ryan, you a dirty anti-vaxxer these days?
I feel like I'm anti anything Big Pharma at the moment. That's kind of the thing. Did Big Pharma make it? Did it stand to make a profit? Yeah, I'm against it. But yeah, it's made me question everything along them lines. And again, I'd heard of terrain theory a little bit even pre-COVID, but never really looked into it. And then over the last couple of years, I've been looking at it more and I'm like, I feel like there's maybe, like some people are like, you're either terrain or germ. It's like, I feel like there's maybe a bit of both in there. Because I don't know if you know who David Wolf is. I think he...
Yes, David Avocado Wolf.
Yes, yeah. I used to follow a lot of his stuff and he popped up recently on Tinfoil Hat podcast again, I think last year. And that kind of got me jogged back into the whole terrain theory stuff. But I need to check this guy out because I've been recommended him a few times, but I don't know if I've ever listened to him. He's been around for years, because I've always been a bit of a conspiracy lover. I always like looking into this stuff, but I've never but I've never gone as hard obviously as the last few years. But I've always been that guy in that group of friends that seems to know about every conspiracy going.
It's almost like COVID was the moment where we were all kind of down the rabbit hole, just peering over, but COVID was like the moment where we all just went full head over heels and just fell down it. I feel like a lot of people they'd gone down conspiracy rabbit holes before, but kind of never quite lost themselves there and lost complete faith in the system. And that was the moment they did it, which Yeah, that seems to be a common thread.
See, I wasn't. That's the funny thing. I was your classic centrist dad.
Oh, were you?
And
so 9/11, nothing, Yuri. You didn't.
Not really.
You didn't.
No, not really.
Nothing. And what about now?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I came to the conclusion, I think, through COVID and just digging, and one of the things that struck me, and it occurred to me just probably halfway through, I'm thinking it's really weird we haven't had any terrorism since this all kicked off.
Oh yeah, terrorism packed up. Yeah, terrorism packed up.
And I just remember thinking, that I again sound like I don't necessarily 9/11. I don't think the state necessarily executes the terrorist acts, but what I think they are very willing to do is to facilitate them by inactivity. So in terms of actively,
I think that's probably about where I am as well. Like I'm not full, controlled demolition, that kind of stuff. But I do think, like, I mean, equally, and we'll get into this. I'm sure I don't want to delve into it too much now. But even recently with this Israel stuff, it's like the idea that these guys could just basically, so easily commit this attack is crazy. I think as with all these things, if there is a benefit to be had from allowing something to happen, that tends to be the way it goes, the resources get redirected or whatever it is. But yeah, it's
like a calculated decision, isn't it? I think there's probably quite a lot of that goes on, in terms of calculated decisions about what might this, create, what might this facilitate. And then, I think there's absolutely no doubt that, there are people within the state that are more than happy to make those sorts of decisions.
Yeah.
It's
Mike, so are you going to go 2 for 2 on all vaccines being bad and 9/11 inside job?
Yeah, well, I think I might be the other one out here in that I haven't took a pharmaceutical product for 22 years. I've not seen a doctor, not took a pharmaceutical. So yeah, I've been an athlete my entire life, and that's why I thought it was so hilarious when COVID came along. I've spent my entire life training 6 days a week. I was training twice a day for decades, and I'm running 100 miles a week on trail, which is about 130 on road. It was like, that was my life. And then I had all these I nearly swore. I had all these slobs coming out and then telling me that I was the one that was causing sickness and illness and going to break the NHS. And I just thought it was absolutely ridiculous. So I was, when all that was happening, I was just laughing my ass off. I don't take pharmaceuticals. I'm sick like everyone else. I get about 2 days a year, usually 2 days a year where I get a cold. So yeah, absolutely against vaccines, against all pharmaceutical products. I think if you can live through those things, your body is designed to fight it off. That's our immune system. So that's what I live by. And, in fact, the first pharmaceutical product, you're going to laugh, haven't taken one for 23 years. The first one I took was hydroxychloroquine. I had half a tablet when I got really sick in summer, for the first time in my life, sick in summer. And I was like, well, I bought these because I'd researched long before. In fact, I got the hydroxy, and I think I might have told you this before, Johnny, but I was watching this virus kind of spread in China back in 2019, and I started to look into it, and I found all of the South Korean studies from SARS-CoV-1. And I said to my wife, and I'm obviously an investor and I'm watching the markets, so I'm always looking for things that might cause this like tidal wave to come along. And the markets were showing weird signs. We had this really big spike in the repo market in 2019, then this virus came along. And I said to my wife, I said, I've never seen anything like this. Like, the news on this one just keeps coming and coming out of China. And I was like, I just can't figure it out. But there's something happening in the financial markets too. So I looked at these studies for SARS-CoV-1 and found out about hydroxychloroquine, that it was effective. So I said to my wife, I said, I'll get us some just in case, because the government might be lying to us one way or another. This was before they'd even said out, by the way, in the UK. But I said, maybe they're lying to us and they don't want us to know there's a deadly virus coming. So I bought us some. However, when I went to the pharmaceutical shop, you couldn't get it. And this was an over-counter of the medicine. Now, this was in February 2020. And they'd recalled the entire European stock of hydroxy had been recalled in February. This was months before they locked people down and admitted to it. So that's when I got really freaked out. And I said to my wife, something weird's happening. I said, that's not normal. So I ended up finding a place in Germany that would send me. It took me about 3 days. So when it all kicked off and I realized it was a scam, I knew there was something going around because people were getting ill. So when I got ill in the summer, I did take half a hydroxy. And that was the first time I took a pharmaceutical product in 23 years. And I was fine the next day. Yeah, I got really ill one day, took it overnight and was fine the next day. So you could say that, yeah, I'm 2 for 2 for sure, Johnny. September the 11th was what actually woke me up when I was a teenager. I went down all the conspiracy rabbit holes back then, and it literally informed my entire life, my career, everything. So yeah, COVID for me was something I'd been expecting my entire life. So when it happened, I said to my wife, it's go time. We need to get out of the country, get to our farm. And it was a little bit different for me, I guess, in that I was expecting something like that long before it happened.
Interesting. Yeah, you're always early on stuff, Mike. Like, I can't believe that you were looking for hydroxychloroquine before anyone had even heard of it in the summer of 2019. By the way, I'm interested to know, you said that you've seen this weird stuff going on in the financial market. Did you manage to protect your finances from the crash? Were you kind of early on that train as well? You were like, this is going down, or did you stay in the market?
100%. I went completely out of the markets in it was about November 2019. So when COVID hit, we was completely safe and never saw any of it. And then at the bottom, I bought some things right at the bottom, and we made a lot of profit in the next 2 or 3 months just as that liquidity came back. Excuse me. And I'm completely out of the markets now for anyone that wants to know. So I think the next few months we're going to see something really nasty. But that's just my take. I'm not trying to scare anyone. But as it got to summer this year, I always want to be early. And I always said from the start of this year, I said, winter's the time when it's probably going to come. So I'm getting out in summer to try and be early on that one.
Oh, you're saying that you see something coming down the line now?
Imminent, yeah. Any time now. It could be over the next month or so, but
it's just got all the signs of another 2009, but possibly worse for me. If you look at some of the, you must see this, Mike. I was reading about some of the, people, missing mortgage payments and things in the States, and credit card debt, missing credit card payments, and there was a great chart I saw the other day on US debt, and the dollar is basically utterly done, isn't it? It's done as a reserve currency.
Well, actually, let's get onto that topic, because that was the next one. Well, it wasn't the next one, but we can skip a couple and get to it because it's an interesting one and we've touched on it now. So, I had this down: debt, the economy, and also the BRICS, because I know that's something that you talk a lot about, Mike. So, I guess first of all, where are we up to with everything with the economy? Because all of us, I think, have at various times predicted it's the economy is just totally screwed, and we've kind of seen bad signs in the economy, but somehow things keep ticking over. I know that JC, I don't know, I know you follow JC, right? I'm not sure whether Mike and Yuri do, but JC on Twitter, he's always saying everyone says that the economy's tanked, but every time I go out, the cafes are all full, the restaurants are all full, and he has a point. It seems that despite all of this inflation and all of this supposed crisis, people are still going out, they're still spending all this money. It doesn't seem to have actually hit in the real world. It's like everyone's still living somehow on this fake economy, which somehow just keeps on chugging. So I'll start with you on this one, Ryan. Where do you think we're up to with economic issues?
If I had to predict, I can't predict because I'm not as well invested as Mike is. That's why I listen to his stuff when I can. But it's been pretty obvious something's coming. I don't even think I think 2008 is going to seem like nothing compared to what's coming. Just this sheer amount of volume of money printed, and then the debt building up, and then especially with other nations that are going to take ahead. I think some nations will come out all right. I think a lot of the Western nations are going to struggle more than any. But just to go on the point that you mentioned with JC, it is interesting. If you look back at previous times where financial assets, when retail spending does actually go up just before it kicks in, it seems, but it's usually on lower to mid-end products. So people stop spending on the bigger stuff like a new car, holidays, new house, but because they still want, that's like a psychological thing, they still want to treat themselves. So you will see that retail spending go up, even though, like, especially gambling and stuff as well. So yeah, that's probably one way to look at it, why they might see people out there shopping and stuff, but it's quite a common trend that when I've looked back at past things, I think around, was it the 70s, there was a crash around then for a short while. And that was like a study then, and before 2008 as well, similar stuff.
All right, yeah. I didn't know that happened, but yeah, that kind of makes sense. So, Yuri, what do you think, economic-wise?
Well, I mean, you could argue that actually a lot of damage has already been done. You know, we've had 2 years now of double-digit inflation. And, you know, anyone who's got savings and sort of investments has already seen the value of that wiped by sort of 25% cumulatively. And, you know, cost of living, I mean, I talk to people, and even people that are sort of, you know, relatively well-financed sort of thing, you can't help but notice it. I mean, you know, I went out, we had a little gathering the other night, just a few of us went out on Sunday night. And, you know, you can't go out for a meal now. If there's two people, you can't go out for even a sort of a reasonably modest meal for less than, you know, 60, 70 quid, really. You know, I mean, You go to Miller and Carter, there's a sort of benchmark. I mean, I've never been to one actually, but, you know, just a regular steak in a Miller and Carter steakhouse is 35 quid. And then you've got extras on top of that. And you think, like, you know, that's, you throw in a bottle of wine, you're going to do 100 quid between two of you without, you know, breaking sweat. And, like, people can't afford to do that, you know, for very long. And I think, I was going to say, there just has to be consequences, you know. Well, I say that. The thing that I've been shocked at, in a way, is that I'm amazed that the sort of existing, you know, fiat system is still managing to carry on. And that we haven't actually hit hyperinflation yet. I mean, but maybe that's around the corner. I mean, that may be it. And you just kind of, it feels like we're defying the laws of physics at the moment to some extent. And you can only do that for so long, I think. And that's the big question for me in 2024. Do we see the great unwinding in 2024 when that all really hits?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I was looking before this conversation, and it was, I mean, I don't know what the actual official inflation figures are. The unofficial inflation figure is 10%. Sorry, the official, I think, is 10%. I don't know what the unofficial is. So, I mean, I think it's like way more than that, just in my experience, even just coming back here to the UK, like 1 year's gone by, and I'm like, things seem to have gone up to me like 30% maybe. Like, it seems much more realistic. I'm not sure what the exact figure is.
That sounds about right. Yeah, I'd say that.
And just while I'm doing stats as well, I was looking at the national UK debt is now, this number, I actually don't even know what the number is anymore. I think it's 1,811,359,890. It's, the number is so big I can't even read the number at this point. The US debt clock is even more. I think that's 33. I guess it's 33 trillion. I mean, these numbers are just absolutely staggering. Mike, like, you look at these numbers and study them, and, you know, I've looked into all this stuff. So, like, can you put into perspective, like, you know, the debt situation, the inflation situation, and just kind of, you know, because I think that people fail to see the actual, like, historical parallels here of, like, exactly, like, just how bad it is, because people just go, oh, okay, well, it's all right, you know, I can still go to the shops and buy things for now. But when you look at the figures, like, it's kind of a mathematical certainty that we're in a, like, crazy dangerous position. So what's your take, Mike?
Yeah, well, we've never escaped what we've arrived at now. You know, it's impossible to escape it, because the debt, the money that we use, or the currency, should I say, that we use, has got debt attached to it. And of course, at some point, that debt becomes so unmanageable. You can't tax it. You know, you can't get enough tax receipts for it. You can't grow your way out of it. And over the past 15 years, all the growth has just come from debt. However, the difference is, it used to be for every dollar that they printed, you'd get maybe 60 cents worth of growth. Now it's like for every dollar, you're getting a couple of cents, you know, so they can't even print the way out of this. So we're getting to that point where there's a reckoning. And you mentioned inflation in the UK. You're right. It was about 30% unofficially. And the reason why we get this official number is because they have changed all of the metrics, and they always do these things called hedonistic adjustments, which is where essentially they'll say, Yuri, you used to buy those 100% sausage meat. Well, now it's in the basket. Instead of measuring the 100% sausage meat sausages, we're measuring hot dogs. And then it's dog food, and they just keep changing it. So they say everything's just cheap, everything's just fine, but they've changed what's in the basket. And over the past few decades, they've added a lot of technology into that. So as technology has got cheaper, they were saying, look, you're all getting richer, and the inflation's low. So it's all of these adjustments. The cook in the books is what I'm saying. But if you use the metrics that they were using in the 1970s, which is where we had our highest inflation over the past 60 years, we actually surpassed that. In 2021 and 2022, we actually surpassed it. Now, once you get over 50% inflation, you are 70% likely to go on to hyperinflation. So if you've hit 30%, and that was just in the first wave of mega printing, what do you think it's going to be when they come back around next year and have to print it all again, but even more? We'll hit that 50%, I can guarantee it. Now, they won't tell you that. They'll say, oh, it's 15%. You'll get 15% or 14%. But it's actually even worse than that, because the problem we've got is the whole system is hyper fragile. It's so interconnected that you can have one bank fail now and the whole system would come down if they didn't rush to the rescue. But when they rush to the rescue, they're trying to keep a dying patient alive. So all they're going to do is flood the system with liquidity again. And that will now just raise that inflation even higher. And then they've got to raise interest rates. But every time you raise interest rates, it blows up the derivatives complex, because the debt market pretty much rules everything. So as you raise interest rates, all of these banks and different hedge funds and all these pension funds that have these interest-sensitive bonds and government debt, it destroys their portfolios. So this year, for example, in pensions, over the past 2 years, some pension funds in the UK have lost 40%. I mean, Yuri, you said that you're 60, so you're on your way to retirement. How would you feel about losing 50% of your pension's value in 2 years? That's your entire life's work. I mean, what would that do to your retirement in this inflationary environment?
It's interesting, actually, because I'm, notionally at least, pretty well provided for in terms of pension. But equally, I mean, the one thing we did, we paid the mortgage off last year. I got zero debt. Although actually, ironically, I'm thinking that's perhaps not such a good idea. What I really should do is go out and get loads of debt, and join the party, as it were. But I'm, and I wouldn't want to sort of say this too loudly, but I'm almost reconciled to the fact that half of that money could disappear overnight, and the only saving grace is that I'll still have more left than half the population. Just by being prudent. And I one of the things I did, I took some cash out of my pension as soon as I could, 18 months, 2 years ago, and put it into some hard assets, because, at the end of the day, if you can put your arms around it, it's got some value, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll get to the hard assets thing in a second, actually, because I want to touch on gold. But you mentioned there about just taking out a load of debt. And I actually, in my very first conversation with Mike, I said this. I was just like, why don't we all just go and take out, just max out as much debt as we can and just buy stuff with it? Because the worst case scenario is you just declare yourself bankrupt. I mean, the way that I see, I mean, it's not necessarily, I'm not necessarily saying that is the worst case scenario. I'm kind of, I guess there obviously are bad things that can happen from that, but you could theorize that. You could say, what's the worst? If you've got no money, for instance, you have no assets anyway, you might as well just say, well, why don't you take more debt out? Because the thing is, in this fiat kind of Ponzi we live in, they've created the situation, they've created the circumstance where this thing called debt exists. It doesn't exist in the real world. It's a fabrication, designed to keep us enslaved. And there's a part of me that's just like, this is a tool that they've kind of provided us. Why don't we just use it against them? Maybe that's a poor way to think.
There is a problem with that,
but
Johnny, in that what they have actually done is the derivatives complex. And for people that don't understand derivatives who are listening, a derivative is basically where I could say, for example, to Ryan, I bet that the price of gold's going to go up, and Ryan says, well, I think it's going to go down. So we say, okay, deal. We've made a deal on that and we've put a bet on it. Now, neither me nor Ryan actually own the underlying collateral, so we don't own any gold. We're just making a bet off it. That's called a derivative. It's a really simple way of looking at it. Well, there's 2 to 4 quadrillion in derivatives, and to put that into context, the global GDP today is about 100 trillion. So they've created a derivatives complex, and this is all of the major banks in the world. So all of the banks where we actually deposit our money have made 2 to 4 quadrillion in bets with each other. And every one of those bets has to have a loser. So that's why the system is untenable. But here's the rub of it all. All of that debt that we are taking out when we're getting our mortgages, when we're taking on loans, when we're buying assets that have loans attached to them, all the ends attached to them, they have actually put up all of that as collateral for these derivatives. And what that means is that when the next financial crisis happens, if you have a mortgage on your house, that house gets handed off to the biggest banks. Now, as far as you're concerned, you're still in the same position. However, now that means that there's a select few banks that are going to own all the assets. So if you want to know how the Great Reset happens and you will own nothing and be happy, that's it. In the next crisis, it will just scoop up all the assets. But here's the really crazy bit that people don't understand. It's not just the assets that the banks hold. It's also all of our pension funds. It's also all of your stock portfolios. All of that's included too. Now, the problem there is they really will own everything. You'll have like a select group of maybe 5-6 banks that own, I don't know, 80-90% of the world's assets. So that's why the debt problems, I mean, that's why I would say stay out of debt and do your very best to get out of your mortgage. So I'd downsize. I would do anything not to have that happen to me, because who knows what they say at that point, Johnny. They could say to you, well, you know, now you've got to have a migrant staying in your back room because, you know, the climate change is bringing them all across, or whatever lies they give. They can control you if you're in debt. Now, what you said about debt, if it's unsecured, okay, well, if it's unsecured, that's their problem, not your problem. It's your problem until the system comes down. But at that point, I think there'll be so much litigation involved. I think that they would have to do a cyber attack. That's the only way they'll be able to get rid of all the litigation that would ensue if the financial system collapses. So I think that would be the time where they do a cyber attack personally, because I can't see any other way of getting through that reset. I mean, that monetary reset, that has to happen, right? We've seen it happen thousands of times in history, where countries have hyperinflated. It just so happens we're living through a period where it's the entire global economy that has to be reset. So
I think that's the interesting thing, though, isn't it? I think in that, like, we've seen this in the past. It's been isolated to specific countries, but pretty much the entire globe now is on the hook, aren't they? Because even if, like, you know, whether you take China or, you know, I mean, I was reading some stuff, and I don't know enough about it, but, you know, reading some stuff the other day about China in terms of, you know, they've had this massive property bubble, and there's a couple of banks have gone belly up, I understand, and stuff like that. And, you know, they're still, you know, they're utterly dependent on the US market, for example, in terms of, you know, their manufacturing base. So if the US can't buy anything, then the Chinese suffer just as much as anyone. I don't know. That's kind of my. I mean, they've got an internal market, but it won't sustain the capacity they've created. I mean, they've effectively become the world's primary manufacturing centre. And a good friend of mine got involved in a business. It was his own business, and it's like a family business. And they got involved in a joint venture with a Chinese company. And I remember he went over there to visit. They agreed to build a factory out in China making products for the automotive industry. And my buddy went out there. He said, I could not believe how big it was, you know, because we have a sort of a perspective here of like a big factory in the UK would be, you know, 50,000, 100,000 square feet. You know, that's a big factory in most, you know, sort of. And he said it was 150,000 square feet. But like the things they make are quite small. And it was like 10 times the size of this factory they had in the UK. And they hadn't even started producing, and there were already about 30 people working there. It was just mad, utterly mad. And they, you know, once they got up and running, you know, they were supplying a lot of the product into the, you know, the Chinese market. But it was on a scale that he struggled to comprehend initially, you know. So That's great when you're on the upward slope. When you taking out capacity when you're on the downward slope is pretty hard going. So.
Yeah, I still don't know exactly where things are going with the whole China thing, because some days I'm like, well, it's just very clear they're going to become the world's hegemon, but then other days it doesn't seem so clear, and we're hearing a lot about the crash of the Chinese economy at the moment. So actually, Mike, what do you think about that? Because given all the study you've done into the BRICS and stuff, what's your take on what we kind of hear quite often now in the mainstream about China's economy being, on the downfall, or them having these issues with sustaining it?
Yeah, I think it's already happened. I think what we're seeing is the transition from west to east, and I think it's been happening for my entire lifetime. If I look back from like a 10,000 foot view, as they moved all the capital base across there, the manufacturing base, and then we saw China's GDP rise, and the Americans, then they reached this parity. So the trajectory is clear. And what Yuri is saying is right, is like, China's having a lot of issues as well. So I think we're going to go through this period of a interconnected global financial crisis. But on the other side of that, I think China's set itself up for the next, to have that accumulation cycle. And Asia in general, that's where we're going to have this huge accumulation cycle. And you can see all of the banking oligarchies, they're already shifting all their attention across there. They're shifting all of their manufacturing base, and the big corpos, they're all focusing on the Asian market. So I think what you're going to see in the West is something like the Soviet Union, but a bit more sophisticated, where you have America's going to retain a lot of power, but it's going to be kind of managing poverty across its own little country, and all of the European nations are going to manage their poverty. And it'll be like subsistence living. So you'll still have these like rich oligarchs and elites. And it's not just going to drop off the face of a cliff, but I think you'll have a huge drop in the standard of living. And I think China will just recover. I mean, they've set themselves up with like 50,000 tons of gold. They're creating the Belt and Road Initiative. That's well underway. So I think we're just going to see like a 10, 15-year period of real hardship everywhere. But then after that, I think, America's going to be done for. Once it loses the reserve currency, what does it have? All it's got is a military, and it's using its military now. So it's kind of like the British Empire towards the end, where it had 2 world wars and it still lost its position. I think America's in that period now where it's going to war itself out, because it's going to use the fiat monetary system that it's still in control of to print the money for the wars. But the moment that Ponzi scheme comes down, what does America have left? All it's got is its military. But I think it will have such substantial problems back home with internal conflict that it will have to retreat from Europe, from Ukraine, from all other proxies. But I think they're trying to speed it up so they can use it whilst they've got it. And that means it's destabilizing everything. We're all in this destabilized world. And I think all of the political chaos, all of the social disorder, the pandemics, and all of this mega crisis that we're seeing, it's just all a symptom of the underlying problem, which is the financial collapse that's coming, and all of it's interlinked. Every time a crisis comes along, they get to print a lot more money. For example, just before the incidents in Israel, where you had the supposed terrorism and all that, let's not get into it, but whatever happened there, the bond yields in America were spiking just before that, which were indicative of more destabilization in the markets, that something was coming. And then the moment that happened, they actually went down. They actually went down. So it stabilized the markets. Now, how is that? How did a war stabilize markets? Well, that's the topsy-turvy, upside-down inversion world that we live in, that when crisis comes along, it gives them an excuse to print money or to lower interest rates. So the markets respond to crisis well. And that's the big problem, is that we're going to see more crisis as this system becomes more and more destabilized and on the brink of collapse. The crisis actually helps it. It actually helps it kick the can down the road another 6 months, another 3 months. And that is why I expect lots of crisis ongoing, because, right now the market should be collapsing because they've been drawing liquidity out all year. So why hasn't it? Every time they've done this over the past 15 years, the market started to collapse. So I would say that there's probably a hidden hand there, secret liquidity in the markets, but that can only sustain it for so long. At some point, they're going to have to come back with like a flood of money, a flood of liquidity, like they did in 2020, where they printed 40% of all dollars in existence. This time, they're going to have to do that again. They're going to have to double that. probably this time. So, all they're doing now, in my opinion, is just kind of maintaining. But at some point, they need to do that. But I think a big crisis has to precede it, because otherwise people will say, well, whoa, we've got 50% inflation now, and you guys did this. However, if there's a crisis, what they can say is, oh, we saved you. We had to print the money, just like with COVID. We had to save you. There was a deadly pandemic, and we gave you all of this money. We gave you stimmy checks. And I think that's what they're going to have to do this time. They're going to have to give us a crisis and then give us a money print. And of course, all that will go into the debt markets, but some of it will trickle down to people, and they'll think that they've been saved again. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll figure it out. That's my hope. But otherwise, I just expect 2024 to be one of those years, one of those big years in the markets, I think.
Right. Okay. And we kind of touched on it here. Then it's probably a good time to move on to this topic, which is the war, or now it's the wars. Last year when we did the Freedom Roundtable, it was just the war.
Which one are you talking about?
Yeah, well, we got two now, and maybe in a year's time we'll have another one to add into the mix with Taiwan. But for now, it's Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine. I'll go over to you on this one, Ryan. What do you think? What do you think the situation is now in terms of these kind of conflicts? I guess both from the perspective of like what's happening really in the world, and also like its effect on the freedom community and stuff. Because I know you're really well tapped into the community online and things like that, and what people are thinking. Like personally, I've seen it being quite a dividing issue, especially Israel Palestine, much more so than Russia Ukraine. So just interested to get your take on all that.
There was a few when Russia Ukraine kicked off where he was quite surprised that they just didn't question it. It was all like, oh, we need to stop Russia, but there weren't too many people like that. And then as time's gone, everyone's got bored of it. Obviously, it's all kicked off with Palestine and Israel, and then I think that has been the big divider, especially with the American commentators and right wingers. It seems to be the one subject that hardly anyone is willing to stand up against Israel, especially when they're in America. Like RFK Jr. he seems to tick everyone's boxes. As soon as Israel gets mentioned, no, fully stand with Israel. Same with the new Argentinian president. He's all behind Israel. No one seems to question anything when it's to do with Israel, despite a number of questions that need to be asked about what happened. One, on that day. Two, how they treat things in the past, and multiple things. There's clearly a lot going on there. There's clearly a lot of lies being told and people with ulterior motives. But yes, it's a very divisive issue with that. And I also find it quite funny that everyone's just completely forgotten about Ukraine at this point, and just let Russia kind of roll through, even though now they're saying that they should be having peace talks, even though that was on the table at the start, but it all got stopped to let the tanks roll through.
Yeah. I mean, nobody really is talking about that anymore. The Ukraine flags have kind of just been slowly disappearing, and for a while was kind of, I guess, replaced by Israel flags, but there's also a lot of support for Palestine. And yeah, I would agree. It seems to be just a very, very divisive issue, and you can't seem to. It's like everyone wants you to take a firm position rather than just saying, okay, let's just not kill innocent people. And I've had kind of spats on Twitter with people who I really respected during the whole COVID thing. I won't kind of name and shame, but there's one person in particular that I had kind of these arguments with on Twitter, who just kind of basically was making out as if anyone who condemns Israel for their attacks on Gaza, for these kind of very, very seemingly I guess just with a lot of collateral damage. We're not talking about very targeted attacks. It's not as if the Israeli military in an area the size of Gaza, that you couldn't carry out a very targeted military operation. But it seems to me to be kind of very with no regard whatsoever to kind of civilians being killed. But when you kind of condemn that, these people who are very supportive of Israel, they'll say, "Oh, well, why aren't you talking about the Hamas attack?" It's like, well, the Hamas attack isn't happening right now. Hamas are not in Israel right now killing innocent civilians. Yes, that happened, and of course you can condemn it, but you condemn the thing that's in front of you. You condemn, what the atrocity that's happening in front of you. I'm going to fire over to Yuri on this one. Yuri, what do you think about this whole conflict that's going on, and how you've seen it affect the community and divisions, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I come at it initially from a sort of a humanitarian standpoint. I mean, the big problem for me is the fact that we've had 3 years now, nearly 4 years actually, of being utterly gaslit by the media and sort of our own governments that lie to us on a daily basis. And so I treat pretty much everything I see now, in the media as untrustworthy. And so to try and kind of, make any valid judgments, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that Hamas are psychopathic, monsters. But it's like, I was trying to make the point to somebody that, we have a conservative government that's doing some pretty awful things. Well, conservative in name only, I would say, but, doing tons and tons of awful things that, somebody outside the UK would say, well, you must agree with them because it's your government. And it's like, no, I want them destroyed, sort of thing. So, and I don't know enough about the whole, conflict other than that. I'm old enough, I can remember going back to Camp David when Yasser Arafat and who it would have been at the time, I can't think now. I think it was it Clinton that sort of initiated that, and they were very close to the point of agreeing a 2-state deal. And then mysteriously, Yasser Arafat said he couldn't agree to it. And the whole thing just fell apart. That's probably the closest they ever got to a 2-state solution. And ever since then, it's just been carnage, frankly. And I don't know. I mean, I think Ryan made the point. The thing I do find bizarre is that, it's pretty clear if you go back to Ukraine, and I haven't forgotten about Ukraine. I still try and keep tabs of what's going on. I mean, it seems pretty clear to me that, NATO's been given a bloody nose. The Russians have proved it, ironically, and sort of, more than one occasion now, that actually lots of reasonably capable kit will typically always beat not much very high-tech kit. Because the thing with the high-tech Gucci kit is that it takes a lot of effort to keep it going. And it's fantastic when it's working, but, they don't have enough of it. And they, the resources it needs to keep things moving are enormous. And so if you've got, relatively, not necessarily basic, but, functional equipment, and what the Russians have got, for example, they massively outgun the West in terms of artillery. That was one of their kind of strategic decisions that they made. And that's proved, to be very effective. So it strikes me that the reality is that the Russians have probably achieved what they wanted to achieve in Ukraine. You can effectively draw a new border, from Crimea up around the Donbass region. And, the idea that the Ukraine are going to retake that, I think, is probably for the birds, frankly. And the fact that the international community, by and large, has moved on. I mean, America is now, taken its focus on that and is focusing everything on, Israel and Iran. I was looking just yesterday, they were showing some of the US fleet build up in the Gulf and in that region. And there's always the issue with military facilities. When you put a lot of it in one location with hostile forces, the chances of something happening are pretty high, so you kind of feel like, there just seems to be enough, hawks within the US administration that, everything's done remotely, huge firepower. I've always said that the only thing that would change American sort of, philosophy on sort of is when, missiles start hitting Washington, because they've never, apart from, Pearl Harbor, they've never suffered, any kind of direct attack, so they don't have that perspective on what it costs to actually be at war. Whereas if you ask people in, the Middle East or Ukraine that have been at the coalface, they'll have a very different take on it. So that's a very long way of saying, I don't bloody know.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, Mike, you're, pretty close to one of these conflicts. I know we discussed it a little bit on your podcast yesterday. But what do you think about, I guess, both of the conflicts that are ongoing and where they could go and what's happening with it all?
Yeah, I think these are just preludes to what they're planning to do. So, I can't lay out exactly what they're planning to do, but yeah, I think we've just seen the start of it. Everything in the first part of this decade is building us up towards some kind of crescendo, and I think it's going to be extremely chaotic. There's going to be the financial system. There's probably going to be nonlinear warfare that will directly affect us. So it will be things like cyber attacks. There will certainly be a kinetic element as well, but where that's located, we don't know. Will it spread out in towards say Western Europe? It could do. It seems like Poland is certainly on the front line of NATO now, and there's a lot of military investment happening directly in Poland as we speak. So, it's certainly not over. I think it's just respite. I think it's one of those, people think, oh, Ukraine's over, but what was Ukraine? To me, it was just the weakener for Russia. What did the US do? The US has not expended any men. It's expended Ukrainian men, but they've got a whole host of other men in Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, Czech Republic, Latvia. Do you think that the US are not going to expend as many bodies as they feasibly can, and the military industrial complex isn't going to be licking their chops at the prospect? So I think that's what Ukraine was about. It was about getting the entirety of Europe on a war footing, getting the public invested, which I think they've failed on. I think they've failed big time. However, let's imagine something happens in Europe unexpected and reignites a passion for war. I mean, we've seen it all before, right? So I think, I think we certainly shouldn't take our eye off all of that stuff.
My experience, I've traveled around the world a lot and, been to lots of different places. And actually, most people just want to live their life, bring up their families, do the sort of the basic things, and the only time people stop being like that is when they're pushed into positions where they have to react. And certainly in my experience, I mean, I was cruising into retirement 3 years ago, and after the last few years, I'm now seeing the rest of my life as being one of active kind of political engagement, or not necessarily political, but I just wanted to be left alone. And they won't leave you alone. So you either kind of surrender or you fight back, and that kind of feels like the position I've been pushed to. So, without having, I've never been to Gaza, but I've got a couple of my good contacts that have, and they described it as an open air prison camp. Well, you never hear it described like that, in the media, do you? Generally, it's kind of so. Yeah,
and you're right. Like, everyone is expected to take an opinion on it and to have to take a side. And this is kind of what I think has been disappointing about some of the people who were strong allies in during the whole COVID thing, is that all of a sudden they're saying, well, no, you have to have this strong opinion. And I just think, well, all we have to do is we don't have to take a side, because people are doing evil things on both sides. What you have to do is just have a set of principles which are consistent. That's ultimately what we should be doing here. And the people who are very adamantly pro-Israel, and I do respect a lot of these people, for their opinions on other things, but they'll make one point on one hand and say, that Hamas's attack, that justifies the war in Gaza. That attack there, it justifies what's happening. It justifies any number of civilians being killed because it's so evil. And if you say that, if you say, well, these attacks are bad, and that, Israel should have show some level of kind of temperance in the situation, that it's like you're justifying Hamas, or you're excusing them. But the same people, when you talk about historical occupation of essentially Israel in the Palestinian lands, they will say, oh, well, that, you can't talk about that. That doesn't justify Hamas's attack. So, either something that happened in the past does or does not justify a current event. And I would say, well, it doesn't. You just take every event that's in front of you and you just say, is this or is this not evil? It's wrong to say, look, this attack that's happened justifies the war in Gaza, but historical occupation doesn't justify the Hamas attack. I mean, I think it's all wrong. Killing civilians is wrong. Terrorism is wrong. And, so is a war which has obvious collateral damage. Now, you could say, well, a war that's going on in Israel like this, is going to have these civilian casualties, and it's just a fact. But, for those civilians who are getting killed, it's not just a fact. Your intentions might be might be better than a terrorist who just wants to go and commit these things. But the result is the same. People are dying. Innocent people are dying. And I think that, for us as people who have been fighting so much for individual freedoms and for, individual rights, etc., like during this whole COVID thing, I think that we just need to be able to say, no, it's all wrong. Like, to take that approach and not be forced into a position, basically. Because, I think it is a shame to see the freedom community kind of like beginning to splinter from this.
I think that's part of the point with everything that they do. They're all, I don't think they really care if you choose side A or side B, really. I think what they care about is that you choose a side. They don't want anyone to be in the middle ground. I think you actually get the most backlash if you are in the middle. If you, for example, was vehemently pro-Palestine, at least you'd fit into the box. Or if you was vehemently pro-Israel, you'd fit into the box. But they don't want people outside the box because that's where the things happen that they really don't want. Like, for example, anti-war sentiment. I can do a lot with angry people, but I can't do a lot with people who don't want any war. I can't do a lot with people who are pro freedom of choice when it comes to injections. If you're anti-vax, if you're completely against it, then I can do something with that. I can radicalize you. I can say that you're a conspiracy theorist. If you're pro-vaccine, I can put you in that camp. But they don't want people in the middle because that's dialogue. And that actually brings people together, because I'm just like you. If people say, what do I think about Israel and Palestine? It's like, I just think it's abhorrent. I just think waking up and seeing videos of dead people on Twitter every day and dead children is awful. Like, what kind of world are we living in where that's if I go on to what's meant to be a social media platform, that's what I get fed constantly. It's such an awful thing to be normalizing, to be normalizing that this is our daily kind of feed. But I think that's part of it. I think they really want you to take a side. And if you don't, I think you're a bigger enemy than, people might think that if you chose, for example, to support Palestine, you're the enemy. I don't think you are. I think you're the enemy if you don't take any side.
Yeah.
But it's that classic, there's a classic meme, isn't there? That you've got the king up on the balcony of the castle saying, we don't have to fight the people with the pitchforks and the people with the bow and arrows. We have to persuade the people with the pitchforks that the people with the bows and arrows are trying to take their pitchforks. I think I've had this conversation a lot with people. It's like, and it's a really disappointing, probably, almost every day, where people seem to need or are steered towards making binary choices. And actually, I always remember there's a great line in that, there was a Jack Ryan film with Harrison Ford, Clear and Present Danger, that one. And there's a line in that when he says, the world is grey, Jack. And, because they're looking to make one of these kind of good guy, bad guy decisions. And one of the protagonists said, like, it ain't that clear. And it's true, isn't it? I mean, if you look at what's going on in Gaza, I mean, there's just nothing good happening. Is there? Because, I mean, Israel can't win that war. They can exterminate every person in Gaza, and all they do is create the next war in the process. Because half the Middle East then will want to, kick off against Israel. You have to somehow, and I don't know what the answer is, but you have to de-escalate, because if you don't de-escalate, your only option is utter destruction. And even then, it's like,
it does feel a bit unbalanced when you see it, though. When the videos come out, it's like, even the videos that you see kind of coming out from the pro-Israel crowd, it's like, these are very high-tech military. This is a very high-tech military force. They're extremely well equipped. Yeah, and I haven't seen anything like that from the other side. So it's really hard to understand why you would have to be so forceful across so many civilians. I just don't understand it. Like, unless it was something else, but I don't want to speculate too much on it. But it just feels, whenever you see the footage, it's like, why are they so like forceful and brutal if it's more of a operation to kind of take out some terrorists? Like, it feels like there's a lot of collateral damage involved in this.
Yeah. It seems strange that we've seen more like awful kind of death and destruction in Gaza, which is a relatively small area, against an incredibly well-equipped military force than we have when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. And in Russia and Ukraine, I've not seen anything like that level of death and destruction. And that's supposedly two modern armies at war with each other. So yeah, it does seem kind of like very, very unbalanced, and there just seems to be a lack of regard for life there. There seems to be, and I know that people are propagandized on both sides of this conflict, but there seems to be just a general kind of lack of regard for civilian life that just it's terrible to see. But hopefully things get better. But I think that I'm in agreement with you guys. I just don't see the solution for it. As you said, even if Israel completely level Gaza, you've got basically an entire Muslim world which is against the very existence of Israel, and I'm just not sure how that resolves itself, unfortunately. Let's.
I was just going to say, you've only got to look at the number of people that have been on the streets in London. That gives you an indicator, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, and I said this on Mike's pod yesterday. Actually, like there's so many people who are radicalized even in the West, because we've had such a lot of immigration into the West, and these people are very, very radicalized on this topic. So that could escalate like globally. It's not necessarily just going to be kind of restricted to the Middle East.
No.
Yeah. All right, I'm just going to move swiftly on to another topic. But Yuri, how are you doing for time? Are you sticking with us a little longer? Or? Another 10 minutes. All right, let me know, and I'll give you the opportunity to say your goodbyes. The next one I was going to move on to actually is it's kind of social media generally. I think you touched on it by talking about the algorithms there, in terms of kind of being fed this stuff, which definitely being fed kind of like a lot of doom stuff. I know you said yesterday, Mike, that you were still getting fed a lot of like doom and gloom on your timeline. I haven't noticed it particularly get any worse. But I guess like more generally, like how's things looking in terms of online media and, decentralized technology and this kind of stuff? Like, are we bullish on it? Do we think that Elon's doing good things, or is that just is it a temporary thing, or is it going in a worse direction? Ryan, let's get your thoughts on this one first of all.
I think on the surface, Twitter's better than it was. Looks like it's going in the right direction, but it's got Elon running it, who I wouldn't trust as far as I can throw him, because he's got heavy ties with like government contracts and all that kind of technology with the brain chips. And then there's certain things about family lineage I've seen with him as well. And yeah, I wouldn't trust him, but I think the platforms may be slightly better. I'm seeing more positive stuff, but I don't know if that's, I've started curating, like purposely responding to certain people and following. I feel like that does influence the algorithm as well. So that kind of helps. Like, I think, I'm not sure if you've had him on your show, but is it Gareth Martin? I'm sure that's all connected by listening to him in one of your pods. That was how I first got to him. And he put a tweet out this morning that I think his first 5 things he's seen was all positive messages. And I think 3 out of the 5 had been off your show as well. So you must be connecting with the right people.
Oh, nice.
I think it was Adam Brimson and Jordan, or the Canadian sports psychologist guy.
Jordan Goldsmith. He's just been on mics.
That's the one. Yeah, and so I think I'm seeing people are trying to push more down that way, but I don't know if it's just the people I'm connecting with. But I don't trust X as a platform for the long term.
Yeah,
I've still been using Minds, which seems to be getting better, and they seem to be doing more. I don't think the uptake's there, whether more people will pick it up as it goes along. I don't know, but if I had to pick one platform over the next, it'd probably be mine. There seems to be quite a few good people on there.
Okay, cool. Jordan Goldstein. Sorry, I think I said Goldsmith. I want to get that right. Man, I'm so terrible at remembering people's names. Mike, what do you think has been the situation on social?
Yeah, I don't use it too much, Johnny, so I kind of use my Twitter just for sharing content, and occasionally I get to interact with people that I like, so I try and stay off it, but I've got to say, mine's been pretty macabre and dark. I don't know why, but whenever I go on, even if it's just stuck on, for a long time I had it on that kind of open one where they had suggestions, then I figured out I can just look at my followers' tweets. But even then, I found that a lot of stuff was still getting through. because, I don't know, maybe they liked it. So lots of videos to do with this war in Israel. Just genuinely don't like it. You know, I get a lot of videos of violence, and I'm somebody who's against violence of all forms. I don't like to see it. So I try and avoid Twitter, to be honest. And like Brian said, I don't trust Elon at all. I mean, this idea that he has bought one of the biggest social media platforms in the world and is somehow not controlled by the same people who control the politicians is a bit naive to me. I think that he's there to be a heroic figure for the right, and he occasionally says something that gets people excited. But I kind of put him in the same camp, I guess, as Donald Trump and I don't know. I mean, there's a few people that say cool stuff, like Tucker Carlson. I don't mind listening to him, but again, you know, they're all kind of a similar type to me, and I don't really trust anyone like that because I don't need to. You know, if someone says something interesting, I'll take it. But for me, Elon was just never interesting, anyways. I don't understand kind of the excitement around him besides that hero worship aspect, which I think some people really like.
Yeah, I think Elon, for me, he's like America's kind of Piers Morgan, but maybe just a bit more, maybe a bit more on the right. Like Piers Morgan's the kind of person who he just says whatever's going to appeal to the majority of people. Like he just goes with whatever that take is, and some of his takes are completely conflicting, whatever. But he just wants to be kind of popular and just wants to appeal to his base. And I think Elon's similar. Like he will just do and say. I mean, this whole thing that he's spent his entire life doing this whole, I'm against, I'm going to stop climate change and we're going to all have electric cars and solar panels and all the rest of it. But he's on this big thing about saying we should all have as many kids as possible and that we need to repopulate the world. And it's like, well, pick one. I mean, I'm not even necessarily saying which you should pick, but those ideas seem contradictory to me. But I think what he's done is, he wants to appeal to the kind of the technological people, the people who are kind of maybe a bit more left leaning, keep them on side with the electric cars and the solar panels. But then he doesn't want to kind of, go full, I guess, maybe like whatever you call it, like anti-natalist or whatever, and say like we should stop having kids because that's going to get rid of another part of his base. So he kind of has these ideas which seem somewhat conflicting to me, but the whole point of it is just to keep as many people on side as possible, just to appeal to a kind of broad base. And to, he seems to be one of these few people who actually is kind of on that not on the dividing line, but he's within those two camps. Like there are a lot of people do like him because of what he's doing with the electric cars and all this kind of stuff. But then he also wants to have that pro free speech people. And if he starts talking about, depopulating the world, he's going to lose them. So yeah, it seems a little bit like inconsistent to me, to put it lightly. Looks like Mike just dropped out, but I'll throw it over to you, Yuri, on that point, and then I'll give you a couple of final questions before you exit.
Go on then. Yeah, a bit like Mike, I think. I mean, I love Twitter. I mean, I'm very open about my affection for Twitter because I think it's a fantastic platform, and what it's done for me, it's facilitated me meeting some absolutely extraordinary people. I wouldn't be here chatting with you guys now if it wasn't for Twitter. So, let's be grateful for what it's created. And it's like anything, it's a tool. And one of the things I think I've managed to do over the years is there are very few things that I get emotionally invested in. Is like Twitter being one. Like I love it, and I think I'd miss it if it disappeared overnight. But it's not going to be the end of the world, sort of thing. Something else will pop up, and specifically, I've made a very sort of concerted effort to get phone numbers and addresses and email addresses from people I want to keep in touch with. So we can still communicate if we need to, because the reality is I mean, although I've got fairly significant following on there, I probably only interact with a couple of hundred people regularly. So I don't know what all the others are doing. Actually, I think they're just stalking me or something. But so yeah, I mean, and I cancelled. I deactivated my Facebook account 18 months ago, and I occasionally dip in just to have a look. And I used to spend a lot of time on Facebook, and it's surprising actually. Once you wean yourself off it, you don't miss it. And I dip in occasionally because I've just got family on there, and I go, oh my God, this is just dismal. Like I can't, like a quick look and jump out again. So I mean, I think social media is it's like anything. It can be used for good or ill, really. And I get huge positives out of it, sort of thing. So and I in a way, I've been sort of disappointed that there hasn't been more innovation. Some of the alternatives, and I guess that's partly to do with the power of big tech. Where they've sort of all the emerging products have all been, almost, sort of killed at birth almost by the sort of the dominance of Twitter and Google and people like that. So I think it's kind of become like just part of life really these days. And it's, if you go back, people never used to have electricity. People wouldn't have known what to do with it. 150 years ago. Imagine living without electricity now. It's possible, but given the choice, you wouldn't, would you? So it's a bit like social media. And I said something the other day, actually, I don't very rarely watch any, media news. So Twitter is my main news source. And it's quite funny, actually, because that people think, some bloke on Twitter told you this, did he? And I said, no, some, eminent scientist on Twitter actually posted a link to a research report, which I read. That's my news. And it's just, anyway, but.
Yeah, well, I mean,
don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah. It did. Yeah, you've done great on there, and it's you've kind of been a very key person in the community. A lot of people know you, or at least they know the pseudonymous you, and you're doing events and all this kind of stuff, which is awesome. So
out myself next year, maybe.
Are you thinking about it?
I think it's. I mean, I don't actually keep it very well hidden, do I? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, now you're doing events. I guess it's hard to remain.
Like, if you want to know who I am, just buy a ticket. You can come and say hello.
Okay, there you go. MI6. There's your option. So before you go, actually, you know what I'll do? Let's do the rounds on this one, because I was going to ask everyone at the end, but since you got to drop, Yuri, we'll do it early. Who's the clown of the year? Clown of the year for 2023.
Clown of the year.
Clown of the year. Do you want me to come back to you and do you last?
Cool. Yeah, do me last.
Okay. Ryan, we'll start with you.
I'm going to go for, it was a toss-up between Jordan Peterson and Piers Morgan, but I'm going to go with Piers Morgan. I think he's contradicted himself that many times. And I think the other day with the phone hackings, he just topped it for me as well. That he's like big quizzed over all that again, and it'd just make him a massive hypocrite if it comes out he knew everything about it, which I think he will.
Okay, nice. Good pick. Strong pick. Definitely will be my top 5. Mike?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the Argentinian president, Javier Milei. I think
I thought you would.
He's a clown by nature. He's been very theatrical, and a lot of the things that he's done are actually very clown-like. He's got a real persona crafted there, but I do think it's a bit of a persona. I think it's a character that he's playing. So, yeah, I think he's my number one, Johnny. Those photo ops with him with a chainsaw and smacking a piñata, ripping things off a wall. So he's my clown of the year.
Well, there's all these pictures of him, and every time you search him on any news site, it's always like a ridiculously close-up photo. It's cropped somewhere between like the eyebrows and the lips, and he's kind of just pulling an angry face. He looks like he's just injected like a lifetime's worth of, steroids or something. Yeah. It's very weird how he's being portrayed, but I'm kind of like, I don't know which way the psyop is. It's like, is the psyop meant to be to get us to trust him, or are they actually, doing a kind of Trump with him where, you make all these pictures and stuff, make him out to be some kind of a crazy man. As I said to you yesterday, Mike, I've not fully made my mind up on it yet, but I totally think that it very well could be, do I use the word controlled opposition? Yeah, I'm going to do it. Controlled opposition, potentially. Yuri, clown of the year?
Yeah, I'm going to go for something a little bit left field and, slightly under the radar, but Andrew Bailey, Governor of the Bank of England, because he's supposed to know what he's doing, and he's as big a clown as any of them. Okay,
nice. My clown of the year, I think I've been tossing this one up, actually. I didn't have an answer before doing this, but in last year's Freedom Roundtable, do you remember who Nat went for? She went for Matt Hancock, and her reason was because he'd gone on this what's it called? This fucking show. I forget the name of it now. Whatever that one is. So I think I'm going to go for Nigel Farage on this one because he went on it this year, didn't he? And I saw Nigel Farage had done some kind of a thing. I think it was I don't know if it was on the Tube or something. He got a big billboard saying like, vote for me on I'm a celebrity or whatever. And I was like, why not do a billboard for something that, like people actually care about? Why not do a billboard saying, support my right to, freedom of choice when it comes to vaccines or something? Like, if I just thought, like, what a ridiculous thing to do. You're a politician. You're supposed to be out there, caring about issues, like caring deeply. Like for me, if someone gave me the opportunity to put something on a billboard, like voting myself in some stupid like TV show would be very, very far down the list. There's a lot of things I'd like to put on that billboard before that. He's the clown for me.
Good,
sure.
Good call, that one, Johnny, I think, actually.
Yeah. All right, Yuri.
Anyway, gents, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Do you want to let people know where they can find you before you drop?
No, not really. Well, if you want to find me on Twitter, it's at Hotel Lubyanka on Twitter. Or if you're interested, if you look it up on Twitter, or it'll be on Eventbrite. I'm doing a Yuri's Big Gloucester Giggle on the 23rd of March, which will be a fantastic, libertarian comedy night and shenanigans, and I might be doing some other stuff next year as well. So keep an eye on what I'm up to.
Awesome. Real quick, what is Hotel Lubyanka? I've noticed that's your handle, but I don't know what it is.
It's a rather ironic sort of post. The Lubyanka building was actually the KGB prison in Moscow.
Okay. So it's another Yuri referenced.
Well, it was kind of the Yuri thing. Started off with the Yuri thing, and then I thought, what would be a sort of an ironic take on modern society in this free Western democracy we live in. I know it's a kind of an analogy of like where we think we live in this free society, but we don't really. So Hotel Lubyanka, welcome to the Hotel Lubyanka. You can check in, but you can never leave, as they say. So
okay.
Seemed funny at the time.
Yeah, no. It makes it's still funny today, Yuri. It's still funny today.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for coming
Always
back on. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Take care.
Have a very happy Christmas all, and let's keep our fingers crossed for 2024. I think we might need it.
Have a good one, Yuri.
Yeah. Have a good Christmas, Yuri.
Have a good one, Yuri.
Yep. Yeah. Cheers, guys. See ya.
All right. So there were 3. Actually, that's a good opportunity actually to go into something different. I want to go into happier stuff because we've kind of just been like down in the weeds with psyops and all the rest of it and controlled opposition. So let's talk about some nicer things. Let's talk about things we've been. First of all, what have you guys kind of achieved this year? I probably should have done this one at the start. I know you did with me, Mike. But what have you been your kind of like main things you've worked towards this year, like in your lives? I guess like personally and in terms of like careers or projects you're involved in, or all the rest of it. I guess we'll start with you first of all, Ryan.
Yeah, I've been doing quite a bit. Like I said, basically, obviously I don't go into much on Twitter about personal life, but like a few struggles. But it's been like, in a way, kind of a good thing to like test myself, because it's kind of proven like a lot of the mental resolve I've been building up the last few years has paid off, I think. And
nice.
Yeah, and I just like been continuing that work of self-development, and then trying like different things out, like occasionally I'll post like about the Wim Hof breathing and the cold showers and ice baths that I've been trying out, and like just trying all that kind of stuff. And then, like I said, I did have a little small business on the side going, which didn't work out, but then I spun another one up recently, and it's just like learning and trying then different things to try and like then hopefully give that information out to other people once I've worked through it. And I think that's just me working on myself, but then to a point where I can then like share that with other people, and hopefully then they can use that information going forward as well.
Yeah, for sure. Do you feel like that everything that happened over the past few years, I guess since 2020 and having to kind of go through that, and I think all of us felt that, that kind of really strong pull, you know, the kind of the current of society was like dragging us in one direction and we're all just saying, no, we're going to resist. Do you feel like that has kind of spilled out into other areas of your life and allowed you to have, you know, more resolve and more like strength to deal with like personal struggles?
I think, yeah, 100%. Because like I said, I've always been like into the conspiracy space and like, you know, this is kind of good. But then this was like before I really realised how many people out there could see what was going on. And I was for this like really, really tiny percentage of people that were in that space. And it turned out to be more once the whole COVID thing kicked off, which was quite a surprise. And then then you think, well, these things can come up in the future. So you start working on yourself and, right, how can I live the life I want to live outside of this system that is clearly not built to help me. It's built to do everything against me. So you start working towards that.
Yeah. I think that is like what it's about, honestly. For me, that's the biggest thing, because aside from all of the minutiae of everything that's happened, like the individual events, the main thing is like, how do we kind of like channel this in our own lives, in our communities? And, you know, I think like, well, definitely you guys have done that and you like inspire people and stuff, which is awesome. So Mike, same question for you. What have you been your kind of like biggest, I guess, successes this year, or the things you've worked on and the things that you've, kind of developed in your own life?
Yeah, I think probably for me, Johnny, the biggest success this year was just kind of keeping all the plates spinning. That was a job at times. And definitely my podcast, I really enjoy making those episodes. I get to speak to quite a lot of different people, a diverse audience rather than just financial. So that's been really exciting, because ultimately I think, you know, when we talk about things like, you know, we've spoken the first part about some of the things that are going wrong. We spoke about the financial markets and things like this. But ultimately, I think that's all just, you know, it's not going to be what we look back on when we're old and grey. We're going to look back on our relationships, our communities, what we did with our families. So I think having the opportunity on the podcast to speak to people from all different areas to do with natural health, or people like yourself who are doing something to do with freedom, I think that for me has been really rewarding. Those are the kind of conversations that I truly want. I think the financial side's good. It's good to try and increase our wealth to give us more protection from some of these difficult looking periods that we're going to all have to live through. But ultimately, you know, what do we need that money for? I mean, you know, I don't crave money. What I crave is like more meaningful experiences. So that's what I'm looking for. And I think making those relationships and connections this year has been probably the best thing that I did.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, I think that, like you said, everything that's happened, yes, you can kind of protect yourself against it. Yes, you can kind of go down these rabbit holes saying, how do I make myself more, self-sustainable or whatever it is, or how do I sort out my finances? And all of that is a part of it. But I think at the other end of that, it's not just a goal in and of itself. The goal is like, how do I learn? How do I develop? How do I become kind of more resilient? And I think that through all of this, it's like, I really do believe that that idea that hard times create strong men, but you have to be willing to actually kind of like take upon yourself that responsibility to just say, okay, like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to deal with these struggles that I'm having? Like, am I going to compromise on my values? I think that's been a big one for me is, you know, I guess in a lot of ways, we always compromise on our values all the time. There's always small things that we do. There's always things that we maybe should say to someone that we don't say, or possibly things that we shouldn't say to someone that we do say, or whatever it is. And I think that when you go through something like COVID, where you really kind of got a gun to your head and, you know, society's saying go one way and you're saying, I don't want to go that way, I want to go another, it kind of forces you to come into a bit of a conversation with yourself and to kind of like really meditate on, what are my beliefs? And am I willing to suffer for my beliefs? I think that's been a big one for me, is like, am I willing to suffer for what I actually believe in? And, I think that a lot of people maybe aren't willing to kind of walk that path and go on that journey. But I think that if you are willing to do it, you can grow beyond it. You can really kind of grow as an individual and kind of achieve and transcend in your life. You know, these periods of friction can actually be a springboard really to totally kind of transcend it and say, you know, I'm going to grow into a stronger person. I'm going to kind of mature, you know. I don't know. I've mentioned a few times, so I do bang on about it. So if people are thinking, oh man, stop talking about this, then I apologize. But I had a conversation like quite early on of doing this podcast with Joel Rafidi, and he was talking about how, we needed this kind of collective rite of passage to go through as a society. We needed a moment where we kind of went into it collectively, which was a collective struggle essentially, because we're not going on these individual struggles in the same way we used to. We're not having these individual rites of passage that we should be having to kind of turn from boys to men, to turn from, girls to women. Perhaps it is the situation. We've kind of like avoided that. We avoid struggle in our lives. And eventually, if you try to avoid struggle for too long, it comes on this macro level. You avoid the micro struggles. And then, one day you find yourself into a situation that, you've got to kind of overcome, and that it's just the kind of walk of life that, no one kind of escapes it. And that's the way that I kind of see things now. So yeah, just interested to get your thoughts on all that, Ryan. Do you see things the same way? Do you think that all of this is just, I guess, an opportunity to learn? That's something we just all had to face to actually kind of transcend and come out the other side of it? Or how do you, what's your perspective on it now?
I think you could say that perspective, that view, there's always like a different way to look at it from a positive side. And I think, like I said, as a society, we have become too comfortable with a lot of things, like to the smallest things now can like break people. Like, whereas, yeah, I suppose you do need that rite of passage. I think I've seen a few people talk about that. That's missing from a lot of people's lives growing up now. Like, we're wrapped up in cotton wool. We've been so comfortable for so long. People don't realise like the mental resolve it takes to get through a bit of struggle. And I think maybe we did need it. Maybe this is it. Maybe we're in the hard times now, and this is where the stronger men are created. And I suppose the ones that will come out the other side, that pass the lessons on, are the stronger people. So I suppose, yeah, you could look at it that way. And it's like, even though it might seem like we're going to go through a hard time for the next few years, it's like, well, who's going to come out the other side? And I suppose it's always the best thing is like, well, what are you going to pass on to the next generation? That's they can take forward with them.
Yeah, I remember you saying that actually in the conversation that we had, like, I don't know if it was last year, but it was definitely like quite early on in when I was doing this podcast. And you said like part of this whole process is that, if we don't kind of step up to the role, the people who are going to be building the new world, the people who are going to build in this kind of post-COVID world after this huge event has happened, they're going to be just like the same people who kind of put us in that mess. They're going to be the same people who made all the wrong decisions, who didn't have any kind of personal belief system, which was kind of like moral and ethical. Like, they're not going to be the people doing it. So we had to use that time to be like, okay, like, who are the real ones out there, I guess, and now, hopefully, like, we've kind of developed some kind of just like a social network, a kind of social consensus network of some kind, where we're just like, okay, like, I trust these people's opinion, I trust their values. Like, I think that's hugely important. What do you reckon, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably been the most hopeful part of everything, is seeing people go off on those self-discovery journeys where we've started to look more inwards about what we can do to change ourselves, and taking that responsibility, almost like saying, well, everything's gotten really messy out there, but maybe I've got to take some responsibility for it, even though, of course, it's not us that are doing it. But if you don't take that radical personal responsibility and accept that you have a role to play in fixing it, and therefore maybe we do have a responsibility, maybe we're always lacking resting on our laurels, maybe we was a little bit. And, I'm not saying we judge ourselves harshly, but I just think as a society, we have been doing that for too long, because, we got convinced by consumption and materialism and, living the good life. But I think it's now time to actually take a bit of hardship and take that stress. And if you've got the capacity to do it, to help other people, Ryan, you've got a great Twitter feed. You're always trying to put positive stuff out there. And I've said to you a few times, that actually is really helpful on a Twitter algorithm that's always trying to bring you down, to have somebody out there that's doing that, and he's not getting sucked into the negativity, which is everywhere. It's so easy to do that, and that's what sells as well. I'm sure you know that, Ryan, that if you put loads of negative stuff out there, you'd probably get a lot more interaction, especially these days, than the positive stuff. But we need that positive stuff. We need people like yourself, Johnny, who are trying to put out hopeful and inspiring content. There's plenty of stuff out there that's dark and black pill, and yeah, it's not my thing, and I don't think it's any of us here. I don't think that's our thing. We're all trying to do something else.
Yeah, I completely agree, Mike. Like, it is just super important to kind of like be maintaining that positive message and stuff. like especially now, especially now. Like I think that there is just so much like darkness out there, and it doesn't really like help stuff. So always appreciate the message that you're both putting out there, because you two are both like definitely like positive people who are just not like, stuck in the doom and gloom stuff, which is one of the reasons that I like talking to you, and I'm glad to have kind of brought you on today. And I really appreciate you coming and giving me your time. Just before we go, there's one thing I want to ask both of you, because you both touched on this now. Ryan, you're doing the whole cold shower thing. Mike, you take some kind of crazy like ice jacuzzi out in your garden. What is this thing about? Like, how, like this whole cold shower ice bath thing? What's behind it all? What's the theory behind it? Is it just a health thing, or is it kind of like a mental thing that you put yourself through suffering and you become a stronger person?
It's been both. Like, I come across it with the whole Wim Hof thing a couple of years back, and I think it's got loads of various different health benefits from your immune system, even to like better hair and everything like that. But also, I think it is that mental resolve. Like, you get up in the morning, you're like, can't. 9 times out of 10, you're still tired when you wake up. You jump in this freezing cold shower, and then you're just good to go at that point. It just wakes you right up.
Do you actually do it every day without fail? It's a cold shower.
Pretty much. Unless I'm like rushing around because I have woken up late and the kids need to get something for school. But like that is a rare occasion. I think 99% of the time I do it. The only thing I want to do now, like I said, I've not really done the ice bath too much because it's getting so I need to get like an outdoor tub that's like keeps regulated on its temperature, so I can just like jump in without having to go out and buy the ice and pour it all in.
Mike, I guess you're it's the weather for it right now in Poland, isn't it? You got your ice jacuzzi ready to go, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it is. I had the first one a few weeks back, but yeah, I started doing it years ago when I was an athlete. So I started doing it for recovery for my legs after running. So I'd run a lot, and then recovery was always difficult, especially when you was doing like back-to-back big weeks, which was every month pretty much. So what I started doing was actually after I run, I'd get in a lake. So it wasn't quite ice water or cold. Then I started doing the cold showers as well. And I found, like Ryan said, it's that kind of mental aspect. Like the way that I always said it to myself was, if the first thing I do in the morning is get that cold shower, it's like I've already done something hard for the day. Like I've kind of toughened myself up for the day. Like something's out the way that's already difficult. And that's just that mental boost in the morning that, it's, you've already done something difficult, and it kind of sets you off right, I think. And once I came to Poland, there's actually a whole culture here of getting in the ice water over winter. It's called morsowanie, which is Morsi is like a sea lion. So and once you get to like late autumn and it starts to get cold, people gather at lakes, and if you're near the sea, you go to the sea, and there's whole clubs. It's like a whole scene. There's like every city has a club, and people just go and do the cold water bathing together, and it kind of gets you ready for winter. So once you get to like -10, -20, you've already built up that cold tolerance. So it feels much less colder than it should do. And the other thing as well is respiratory health. So I found that since I came to Poland and started doing this, I've never got a winter cold or flu. So all throughout the last 3 years, I just never got it. And every year in the UK, I did get it. So I don't know if that's the only reason. Like, I can't just say it was definitely that, but that was like rare for me. So just all of it, that's kind of the extra element that I found in Poland that I didn't have in the UK, is that community aspect. So, doing it together. In the UK, it was always just by myself, but it's actually really good fun if you can find people to do it with. It kind of spares you on, and makes you can make new friends from doing it. So it's a really fun activity.
Okay, fair enough. I got to say, Mike, I'm my one reservation about coming to visit you in Poland is that you're going to put me in that freezing cold jacuzzi you got outside. But
I totally would as well.
I think you would too. All right, cool. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Because I always forget to do this at the end of podcasts. And I always used to do it, and then I've kind of like forgotten lately. Normally, I used to ask my guests to give us some kind of parting words of wisdom and parting words of positivity. So, first of all, just let people know where they can find you, and then give us some parting words of positivity for my listeners. Starting with you, Ryan.
You can find me on, obviously, Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it these days. Also the same handle on minds. And same parting words of wisdom is don't get blackpilled. Like, if there's always hope out there, and there's still plenty of people that want to do the right thing. So just, always try and look for the better in people rather than the worst. Don't let the chaos in the world mess everything else up in your life.
Nice. Love it. And Mike?
Yeah, you can find me on parallelmike.com, or you can just search for my podcast on any podcast app, which is the Parallel Mike Podcast. And we get into a whole range of stuff on there, from natural health, but there's a lot of spirituality too. I do have a YouTube channel, Parallel Systems Broadcast, which is more about finance. And also, I'm on Twitter, parallel_Mike. And parting words is, I think Ryan put it best, is, just, be hopeful throughout all of this. All of the things that are going to happen anyways. So you may as well try and live well throughout it. We could sit and stare at all of the darkness that's out there, or we can get on with living. We've still got our own individual lives to live. We've still got our own families to provide for and take care of. So focus on that. Focus on yourself and your community. And I think we can all have a great life, irrespective of what happens outside of our little world. But it does require us to take action. You have to step up and take action in your own life.
Nice, and that's definitely something that you guys have been doing. So keep going out there and spreading the positivity and educating and doing what you guys do. Really appreciate you coming on, and have a great Christmas.
Thank you, Johnny. Thanks for having us on.
Cheers, Johnny.